नहमदुहु व नुसल्ली अला रसूलिहिल करीम. Amma ba'du fa'uzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Today our topic was Jesus God? First of all, is it logically possible for Jesus to be God? Jesus can't be God, because if he was God, then how was he 100% human? According to the Christian creed, Jesus was 100% man and 100% God. He had two natures, one human and one divine, but they were both 100%. Okay, so how can he, if he was 100% man and he had a human body and he had a human soul, how could he be God? What is left there to be God? Was his spirit God, or was his physical body God? If his spirit was God, then he was half God, not fully God, and so his body would have to be God. But then it couldn't die on the cross because his physical body wouldn't be able to die because it was God. So it doesn't make sense. One padri I talked to says God is everywhere, and but Jesus was fully human still. He had a human body and a human soul, but God was everywhere. He wasn't just in Jesus's body. Like Jesus's body wasn't God. God was everywhere. So then how is Jesus any different than me? If Jesus has a human body and a human soul, and I have a human body and a human soul, and God is not just dwelling in Jesus's body, he's dwelling in my body too, and he's in everywhere. So then how can Jesus alone be God? It doesn't make any sense. Now we can look at the Old Testament because it came before Jesus, and but it says that one verse is quoted where they say that Jesus is God in the Old Testament, where a prophecy says that virgin shall give birth to a son, and he shall be called Mighty God and Everlasting Father. Okay, but Jesus says, don't call anyone Father except the Father that's in heaven. Okay, so then if Jesus wasn't the everlasting Father, then how could he be mighty God? He can't be both. He has to be one or the other. If we take the statement literally, if we take it metaphorically, it makes sense. But if we take it literally, then he can't be everlasting Father because he was on earth, and no one on earth can be called everlasting Father. So then, how could he be mighty God then, literally? Because if the everlasting Father is not literally true, then how could mighty God be true? Okay, so next point. Jesus in the New Testament. First of all, the only things we take seriously from the New Testament would be the words of Jesus. First, we have to look at the words of Jesus. We don't have to worry about what John says or what Paul says, because they came later and they weren't Jesus himself. If Jesus never claimed to be God, then what right does John have to claim for Jesus, or what right does Paul have to claim for Jesus? We care about what Jesus says, not what someone else says. Okay, so now Jesus never says I am God, or he never says worship me, and throughout the entire Gospels. So then why would you believe he's God then? So is he shy in making his claim? Like the Old Testament God, whenever he would appear, he would always say, I am God. Why doesn't Jesus do the same thing? Just those three words. Why doesn't he say, I am God? But if he was God, he would at least make that claim, unless he's a shy God, which doesn't make any sense. If our whole salvation depends on the belief that Jesus is God, then why doesn't he make this statement clear? Because if he made it clear, then it would make sense, then he would save the world. But he clearly doesn't seem to want to save the world if he's a loving God. So he doesn't seem to be a loving God, because he's not making the claim he should make, that he is God. He's misleading people by giving weird hints, but not fully claiming that he is God. Okay, but there are some verses that Christians quote where they say that he claims to be God. The first one is where he says, before Abraham was, I am. Okay, they say that he is quoting the Old Testament, where the old God says I am that I am, and tell the children of Israel, I am has sent you. Okay, but first of all, even in the Greek Septuagint and the Greek New Testament, the word for I am is different. So he couldn't be making that claim, and Jesus never spoke Greek, so we don't really know what he said exactly because he spoke Aramaic, not Greek or Hebrew. Okay, so then he couldn't be making a reference to the whole Testament. So then how could Jesus then be God? Because he said claims to exist before Abraham doesn't make him God, because there were a lot of people who existed before Abraham, and who knows, we all may have existed before Abraham. Our souls may have existed before Abraham, and we obviously existed in God's knowledge because he knows everything. So he obviously knew about us before we were created. So in that sense, he could exist before Abraham. But this doesn't prove he's God. Maybe the Jews misunderstood him and thought he was actually claiming to be God. But this doesn't prove that he's God. He's not clear that he's God. We don't know what his intentions were, and if the Jews misunderstood him, that's their misunderstanding. It doesn't prove that he is God. Okay, so that is completely debunked because it is not clear, and it could be interpreted differently, and Jesus is not clear that he is God in that, and the Jews may have just misunderstood him. And the same for uh, uh, I and my Father are one. If you read the context, it's clear that they are one in purpose, not in essence, because they want to do the same thing. They have the same purpose, so they are one in purpose. And then also that when they quote doubting Thomas, when he sees the Jesus after his crucifixion, he says, my Lord and my God. He's just saying, oh my God, just like anyone would say. He's not saying Jesus is God. He's praising God and telling God he is God. He is not telling Jesus that Jesus is God. There's no proof from that verse that he's saying, Jesus, oh, you are God. He's not saying that. He just says, my Lord and my God. He doesn't say Jesus is God. So, and Jesus, there's no proof. He never says he is God, and neither do the disciples come up to Jesus and say, you are God, we believe you are God, and Jesus never he himself claims to be God, and the disciples never say it to his face that you are God. So there is no proof that Jesus is God. And but on the other hand, Jesus says, the Father is greater than I, the Father is greater than all, and I can of myself do nothing. So this proves that the Father is God, and there is only one God, who is the Father, whom we call Allah. So there is no Jesus God. He is not God. He is a man. And inshallah come to Islam and stop believing in Christianity. Inshallah. Allahumma ameen.